In this episode, number 112 of the Goals-Based Advice podcast, I interviewed Justine Hendry, Gold Coast-based advisor who specializes in an interesting niche market and loves helping her clients solve complex and complicated situations. From her early days in helping her fellow planners write plans and developing one of Australia's first paraplanning businesses, to these days where Justine enjoys helping her clients solve complex legal, structural, and financial situations, bringing together the many different departments needed to get good outcomes for all involved. Justine covers several topics like charging fee for insurance advice and goals-based advice for women. We also cover just how she nurtures client relationships. If you've ever needed to help your clients through untangling financial complexities, then this episode is for you. Welcome to the show, Justine.
Thanks for having me, Fraser.
You're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me to your lovely office here in Southport.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, and Lexi as well, coming on to be your sound engineer.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got a good crew. So let's start with you. Tell us about yourself at the moment. What are you doing?
What am I doing? I joined Quill about 18 months ago, and I started off in the wealth side of the business, but since then my role has sort of transitioned to be across all of our services. So we've got an accounting division and a self-managed super admin division, and we also have some in-house legal estate planning and some other sort of commercial type services.
Fantastic.
So
you're an advisor, but your actual role is more of a
bringing all of those together
bring
for
them
clients.
all together. Yep.
So it might be with starting off with clients that we've got that don't have all services but may need them, identifying where we can help them in other areas, and sort of breaking down the silos that have been in the business before. But also the sort of work I've been doing in the past has involved getting sort of being that central trusted advisor and bringing in clients' accountants and bringing in finance and whatever the client needs. So being here and having all of that and being able to create a team for each client that I get referred in has been really just allowed me to give a better level of advice and a more seamless service to clients.
So I'm thinking now reasonably complex situations and clients. They're not sort of your standard mums and dads. Getting, moving towards retirement or anything.
Yeah, I don't tend to get those referrals. I tend to get the ones with the problems because of previous kind of work I've done. Yep. And I wonder when they're going to come in, because that's the easy stuff. But really, I really enjoy more complex problems, whether that's complex sort of emotional problems or, that lead into needing financial solutions. The more complex, the better. And I feel that we through building the right team, we can usually solve those problems.
Yeah, fantastic.
Pretty quickly.
So let's go back on a journey. Let's start from the beginning. Where did it all start for you for financial services?
My first role out of school was working for a couple of Hill Ross financial planners, and I think it was 89. It was 89, so over 30 years ago. And I didn't realise, I was just looking for a job at that point. Didn't realise that I was going to sort of love the industry so much. And it probably took about 6 months I realised, whoa, this is really good fun. This is, I can see they're doing great work. And this is, in very, very early days of financial planning, there was a lot of life guys around, but not many planners. And they were sort of approaching things like the good planners that we see today, even 30 years ago. So I had great mentors, a great early education, and because I was so interested in it, they really encouraged me to go back to school and start studying towards formal qualifications, which back then there wasn't much around, but So
straight out of school.
Yeah.
What was your job? What was the first part?
filing and making coffee.
Right. Yep.
And then it sort of turned into there was a general insurance agency in there, so doing a little bit of work on that and running life insurance quotes off a shared computer. I think 5 of us had one computer between us, and not much else for the first
Yep.
few months. But I loved sitting in on meetings, and I loved watching and watching the my bosses, what they did with their clients, and the care and it was just interesting. So that sort of turned into paraplanning over time, and
Yep.
then I then rented an office and sort of had a bit of support in starting up for myself when I think I was 22 at the time, so young and had no idea. But
It's not true. When you're 22 years old, you've got every idea.
yeah,
You know exactly what you want to, like it's one of those times in your life where you go, oh, great, I can, the world is endless, right?
I know.
And I don't know. I think when I was 22, I thought I knew everything. Looking back, of course,
Yeah.
I probably knew everything I knew, but I didn't know everything. But
Yeah, same. And I look back and I sort of cringe sometimes and think, oh, but, I thought I was doing it all for myself and making a big success of it. But really in the background, I had a few people looking out for me. So
yeah,
that was a great start. And because I was reliant on back in those days, they used to give certain payments for rookies, and because I was reliant on that, I was to pay for my office and my phone and all those sorts of things. I had to attend AMP sales training every morning to get that bonus from them, and I thought that was a little bit beneath me, and I didn't want to go in that area. But it was the best training ever.
yeah,
Solutions based
yeah.
sort of training, and lots of videos, and watching the people who are still around, the American the guys that we sort of come across these days, even like the Jim Rowans and the
Yeah.
yeah
So
and,
they called that the sales training back in the day.
yep
It got renamed soft skills
yeah
later on, but essentially it's just like understanding, really getting to the bottom and understanding what a problem is, and then what you can, if you can help,
if you can
how you
help.
can help them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So I thought it was a waste of time, but probably the best start anyone could really have. And sometimes now when I'm doing a training course, it's a lot of the same rehashed. And 30 years ago, I got the opportunity of doing that before I even
yep,
started anything else.
yep,
So yeah, very grateful for that,
yep.
even though I would have declined if I'd had a choice.
Yep.
But
Now talk to
yeah,
me about the power planning stuff, because obviously, I guess we were talking about that time frame where it was probably around FSR, Financial Services Reform,
yeah,
came in, and we went from customer information brochures, or what they CARs, customer from
yeah,
advice records, through to SOAs through that transformation, and then
yeah.
you were doing a lot of that plan work. I guess there was a lot of other. I remember the time there were a lot of planners at the time were struggling with that. How do I now turn my skills to typing up an SOA on the latest technology,
Yes.
Microsoft Word.
Yeah, well, while I was starting up and trying to build clients and working pretty hard, and some weeks or some months thinking, where's my income going to come from this month? Um, other advisors, or really most of them were more insurance based guys that wanted to do some superannuation. They weren't really sort of giving full advice at that point, were asking me to help out, because I obviously, being young, found that all very easy, and also studying was sort of up with what the regulation was and what we needed to do. So it started off with, oh, Justine, I'll give you $200 if you can do this for me tonight. And I was doing a bit of that, which was helpful at the time. And it then turned into, well, I could probably charge 400 or 500 now, and AMP Financial Planning or Hill Ross are charging 700 or 800, and their work's not as good as mine. So, and their timeframes were, not great. So I started doing that, which then turned into being inundated, and then met some other young financial planners that that wanted to get together and start an outsourcing service. So three of us got together. We sort of put a bit of a business plan together, and then went with it with a few different solutions. It started off with just the planning. It turned into some consulting in advisors' offices, showing them how to sort of, looking at their systems and processes and working with their staff as well in training on how to actually produce documents and all the tricks of doing it quickly. And then we started doing training for a few different organisations, dealer groups, RMIT when they were running their first the financial planning degree, or they were sending off graduates over to us for training so that they were more job ready. So yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, it's amazing how things evolve, isn't it? Sort of, there was a need, not just the need to see your clients, but also help out your fellow colleagues, and that need then almost became a greater need than or a more pressing need, I suppose.
Yeah. So I ended up selling my client base after a few years. I tried to do both. I was much more interested in the business and the consulting side of things. I found that a bit more interesting, but that became tough over time with regulation and who's giving the advice, and so that was I ended up going back to advice.
Yep.
And building client base again. So
yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So you built up your paraplanning business.
Yeah.
Then you also did some travel.
Yeah. So I built up, after paraplanning, I built up a client base and then sort of ran that. It was quite boring, actually. It was just plain old retirement planning, which was sort of the
Shout out
thing
to all
back
the retirement
then.
planners
Yeah,
listening.
sorry, wasn't my thing. And I was really keen to get out. And my husband, we had a child at the time, our first child, and he was saying, "Where are you?" He said, "I know you're not going to stay at home. Where are you going to be able to have the flexibility, work in the industry that you're trained for and that you love, and earn the sort of money you do? Even if you you wouldn't even earn half if you went and got a part-time job to fit around our sort of needs."
Yeah.
So he was anti me selling it, but then he got an offer to go to London with work, and I thought, beauty, I can sell the business and pursue something else that I'm more interested in, which was fashion at the time.
Yep.
That didn't work very well. But anyway, at the time I thought that was, a good answer.
Yep.
So yeah, I sold and we left, and I was working in fashion, and it was great. I loved the actual creativity, and I was in sales and as well, and we were launching a new brand, and it was really exciting, except that no one had any business sense, and I started getting really frustrated that I was the one leading all the pitches and for the team, and everyone else was dressing up and running around and
Yep.
doing what people in fashion do.
I don't know anything about fashion, so I can't contribute to this part of the conversation at all.
So going to lots of events, which is great. I love that too. But at the end of the day, we've got to sit down and knuckle down and make the business work. So ended up then, I thought, what can I do? Oh, well, I'm not going to sit at home. I've got to work and meet people, and my husband was away a lot, so I needed that sort of social stimulation. So off I went and sat what they call the FPCs, which is sort of like our RG 146, and got the bare minimum so I could go and get a job in financial services.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and that was fun because, it was something different. It was very different. It was more mortgage based.
Yep.
And insurance based, but really high end clients and really sophisticated firm. And we were fee-based, completely fee-based. So we were selling insurance and providing mortgages and debt solutions, often offshore and often sort of quite sophisticated, products based on foreign currency rather than sterling. And we charged a fee.
Yep.
So and it worked.
Yeah, so exactly right. So got over the fear of charging fees and started working with really high-end clients.
Yeah.
And that sort of got two things that you sort of brought back with you?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that it's so, UK is so class oriented, and the owners of this business had gone to the Eatons and the Harrows, and we had a stream of clients of that ilk. And but very quickly they decided I was neutral because I had an Australian accent, so they could put me out in front of their clients, whereas a lot of other people from regional UK or say
Oh, you were
Scotland.
international.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
that
so
was
that
okay.
pushed you up a class, did
It
it?
did. Well, not really, but as far as they were concerned,
Yeah.
people wouldn't be turned off.
Yeah. Okay.
So their clients would be turned off. So I got really good opportunities there, and yeah, yeah. So it was really interesting,
Yep.
and going through their change into fees and flat fees with insurance was really interesting.
And tell me about that moment, because it's obviously that's a different thing for you to go through.
Hmm.
Is that you just turned up? That's the way they do it. They just taught you how to do it, or did you go through? Was there any anxiety around that, or was it like the first
No,
time you did it?
no, I don't remember that. I sort of had a week of role playing and making sure they were happy with me,
Yep.
and their induction sort of training,
Yep.
and it was just based on that. So
Okay.
that was the way they did it, and you had to be supervised. So I'm probably sort of person that would, if no one was around, I'd be maybe go back to my comfort zone. But you were supervised at first, and
Yep.
it worked.
Yep.
And I actually, I just had a stroke of luck. I came in the first month. They've business has been going a long time, but I think because I was, really focused on doing everything they told me,
Yep.
I I smashed the sales record I never smashed it again, but on my first month I smashed the sales record they had.
Oh, great. So it was
Um,
their sales. It wasn't you coming up a low base and smashing your own record.
no, 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 it was theirs.
So this is
Yeah.
a fairly topical point at the moment for a lot of our listeners who would be trying to get over their own anxiety and fear around how do they move from maybe risk from a commission to a fee basis.
Hmm.
What tips or advice would you give to those listeners?
Oh, going back on that, I have been involved in businesses trying to go fee based on insurance in Australia, and it has been a struggle.
Mm.
I think back there because we had to do it that way. There was no other way, and and our fees were very similar to what the commission was going to be.
Yep.
It wasn't based on time or value or so. And I think insurance absolutely can be fee based, and especially when it's combined with a suite of products, and your fee is X regardless.
Yep.
I think one of the barriers here is in Australia is that it's not a like for like in rebate and commission. So
Mm.
the premiums don't go down. So
Yeah.
clients, when they see that, are like, often, I'd just rather pay commission. And because we're not forced to do it, that's the way we're sort of pushed into that,
Yep.
keeping that way. If they're comparing with other advisors, then
Yep.
you sort of can be at a disadvantage. So that's not a tip, I realise.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. How would you do it with regards to charging for insurance a fee? Say if you were doing it right now for fee insurance, would you do it more of an upfront style of there's a lot of work to be done now, we charge it and we don't charge ongoing, or would you try and spread that out over a longer term?
um,
Ongoing fees for them.
the thing with insurance is that there's always the potential of managing a claim, and there's also, I guess, if you're doing the job well, you want to be reviewing that as you review everything else.
Yep.
So I actually don't do insurance only advice. So it's always as a combination with something else. So then it would be as a part of that annual fee, but I would adjust that fee. We've got a special key fee calculator we use to make sure that's all covered.
Right.
And I'll often rebate commission against that fee. So it's not fee only and no commission.
Yep.
But if that makes sense.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that brought you back to Australia, and then you've been back here now and working with mostly sort of the maybe high network, or as you said, more complex clients.
Yeah, and certainly a lot in the wealth, rather the earlier stages than the later stages, where high earning professionals, wealth accumulation strategies for high earning professionals. That was where it started, and mainly around the doctors, which is then, that sort of ended up being a lot of the time multi sort of entity advice.
Yep.
And it sort of just then moved on and
Evolved, as it does,
evolved,
yeah.
yeah. And I find myself now doing mostly advice for women, mostly. Although, and back then it was mostly advice for men. So it's sort of changed over time, and that's not something that I actually just made a decision on or started to target that market. It's just the referrals have come in, and I guess because I'm a working mother, I find myself in the same situation as a lot of the clients that are referred.
Yep, and they come in and they see what you're doing, and then sort of think, that you'll understand or empathise with their situation.
Yeah, and it helps with the questioning. It helps with me understanding the sorts of issues they may be having in the background, and getting my questioning right around their goals and
exactly right. Now let's talk a bit more about that questioning around their goals. How do you sort of bring that up, and how deep do you go with them on their goals?
Depends on the actual client and their circumstances, but for a professional female who's sort of at the start of her career and she's deciding, I sort of focus on a number of areas to start off with, and that's really their question them around what they want in their career and the things that they really enjoy most in their role now. Any sort of educational goals they have, and sort of understand where they see themselves going over time. And then around their personal life and relationships, and if they're single, where they, what do they think they want in the future? Are children something that is really important for them? Ideally, when would that be? And if they're in if they are married or have a partner and or have children already, just around their ideal life and what's most important to them in terms of family. And trying to use those to sort of then work out the answers to those and what's important to them, to sort of create, I guess, a balance between the two and start planning around that early and educating them around the sorts of things that may come up in their that sort of over time.
And are you when you I know it's a bit of both, but you sort of speak to quite a few at the time of divorce or separation, or a major life event like that is happening as well. Is that where you get a lot of your clients from?
I do, and that's an area that I'm really interested in. So I guess that's where I get most referrals from. And that's from Gold Coast and Brisbane lawyers. Generally, both from the family law side and sometimes from the estate side as well. So
I'll touch on this referral conversation, because you've got a lot of relationships with these lawyers that you've built up over time. But sort of how did you build those up and nurture them and introduce what you do to them, and how do you continue to let them know what you do so that they can refer to you?
Well, a former colleague of mine suggested I get in touch with a family lawyer on the Gold Coast when I first arrived, because I knew no one, and I was in a role where I was supposed to build clients. And actually another person I knew here also suggested I get in touch with her, because she was running groups of groups of family lawyers that were interested in a certain process. And through that, it just built. There might be like 30 or 40 members of that group. Some of them are mediators, some of them are financial based, and but mainly lawyers, family lawyers. And that sort of just then, I guess, launched into new relationships, new social contacts when you knew somewhere. And I was fascinated by the process they were using, which was a multidisciplinary approach to solving their clients' problems. And through that I also did some training, which was really, really valuable, and I've done it a number of times now, and watched how they brought mediators or relationship experts in to help with coming up with a financial agreement, and financial experts, whether that be valuers, forensic accountants, financial planners, and sort of put the pieces together so the clients get a really good outcome. So they've got the specialists working on each sort of part, and that's really of interest to me. And I guess that's at Quill what we're basing a lot of our services on now, not necessarily going through divorce, but
yes. And that's where you've evolved to, isn't it? That role of being able to help the client get the information from all these specialists. And you've been almost the relationship person in that role.
So you need to understand how it all works. You know, there's the
technical background
side, but then really just one person being able to communicate why all these parts are important and why their accountant's advice over here is important, and you know, and also letting the accountant know what we're trying to achieve. So you know, so working together and having that seamless kind of outcome for the client. So most of the lawyers I'm dealing with now use an approach like that. And then that's why I'm getting the referrals. Back to that question.
Exactly right. And I can see that a lawyer seeing you work with your client and then helping in their part, and then seeing what all the other things you do, would be very willing to refer. But in the very beginning, when you talk about just starting a relationship with, you know, a lawyer, what tips would you give to somebody who's in that situation where they wanted to try and get some relationships with family lawyers? You know, like anything, it doesn't happen overnight because there's a whole trust thing that has to go on. But what tips would you give to planners thinking about trying to start that relationship?
Well, certainly there's a lot of law groups around. Like on the Gold Coast, we've got 4 or 5 different, even family law-based groups that I can think of. There's lots of, you know, you only have to look on Facebook to see networking events that are just come along, and you know, you need to be consistent. No one's going to refer to you straight away. And you need to, I guess, develop a bit of an understanding on what their issues are and what's valuable to them in the work they're doing. And just keep at it, I think. I guess when I started, I thought they're not going to want to speak to me. But it was actually the opposite. I think accountants are done with people contacting them, and from our world, or not our world, but the financial planning side of things, they've been hounded with you know, the changes over the last few years. But lawyers are actually, especially family lawyers, a lot of them are not overly experienced or skilled with financial matters, except that's the biggest thing they're working on.
Right.
Your commercial type lawyers often do have a background or more of an understanding. So they're and they're not allowed to give advice. They're not allowed to give financial advice in the way we are. So if you know, what we do is really valuable, as long as we understand what the issues are and what they're looking for. In terms of help.
So they are looking to talk with advisors. We just need to get through that trust and consistency is a great way to do that.
And I think that what I've discovered over time is that they're not interested in financial planners that are wanting to sell a product or wanting to write a quick SOA and secure a fee. It's often a long process, so you have to be prepared. You have to sort of think about how you charge, what the client's situations are, because often, to start off with, they've got no funds or very little funds, and that'll come over time.
Because interestingly enough, their funds will probably be locked up at that time.
And
it's not that they don't have the money.
No, that's right. They do have the money. Obviously, we're not a charity service, you know. we're not working for nothing, and they're not. There are other ways for people that are in financial difficulty to get help.
Yep.
But it's just having it locked up and not having access to enough funds. And when they approach a lawyer, and they engage a lawyer, they're often required to put a large amount of money in the trust account to cover that work. I've invested a lot of early appointments with no fees. And when they engage us, we do get a deposit.
Yep.
But often it's put on hold until the work is put on hold. It's until it's time for us to get re-engaged.
Yeah, sure. And so a lot of the situations that you're working in this almost mediation role, where you're actually, it's not quite the mediator, but it's the role where you actually need to be across all the the different areas, and then use the specialists. Engage the specialist. I shouldn't say use. It's a terrible word. In this situation here, talk to me about some of the issues that have come up, like the problems you're trying to solve, and how you reach out to those specialists to solve them.
Okay. Well, so certainly we're not the mediator, but we work at times alongside the mediator.
Yes,
we get a lot of referrals from mediators.
We have to be careful, because there is actually a role called a specialist role called as the mediator. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's coming more common that clients will see a mediator first, then engage financial and lawyers to do the rest. But no, often I guess the training that I did early on in the collaborative process, which is that multidisciplinary approach, I guess got me thinking about the win-win, regardless of, you might be engaged by one client, but always thinking, how does this work for the other side? And if we have a little bit of an understanding, in a divorce, usually the person you're working with has known that person for a long time, and they understand why they want what they want and why the conflict exists. And so being able to look at things in a different way, rather than one person wants this and the other person wants, and often they want bigger slice of the pool than on both sides, and 70% and 70% doesn't equal 100. So
that's the tactic, right? Because I don't really know, and I hope I never know, but the scenario is the lawyers go, great, let's go for 70, and then we'll meet in the middle. Is it the more we fight, the more fees are paid?
No, actually not with the lawyers I'm working with, because they have a very different mentality and they want to see a good result for their clients. Yep. So certainly not with what I'm seeing, but it's more the emotional driven, from the emotional driven decisions from the clients, or objectives from the clients, that feel that they need a particular asset, or they need a particular amount of money. And it's usually, the more you question, the more you understand that and break it down, it's usually a different reason. It's it's a fear, generally, a fear about losing something that's really important to them. And understanding how to deliver what's important to them, or solve that problem so they still get what's really important to them, by looking at other alternatives. And compromise can often, it can provide a solution to both sides, really, and get them to that point of agreement.
This is a fascinating piece to me, because obviously a lot of decisions from the client's point at this time is being driven by this heavy emotion, and a very strong emotion, and usually a lot of different emotions stacked on top of each other, and then the practical / the numbers are just their numbers, and the clients then again are often not thinking about the numbers, they're thinking about the other stuff. So I guess a big part of your role is almost that mental side of it, psychological side of it,
and with a breakup, or a divorce or a separation, you'll often find that one partner's well ahead of the other one, emotionally. So you'll often find one that is just not willing to make decisions because they're not ready yet. And that can be just a waste of everyone's time. You can put all the solutions in the world backwards and forwards. Sometimes you just need to give it some time and come back and.
Is that the tip? Is that the tip? Just
I don't know if that's a tip that
you can't really get around that one, or is there any?
Yeah, sometimes sometimes the lawyers will identify, the good family lawyers that are well trained in that side of things will recommend counselling or recommend an expert in that, whatever the issue is, or if it's child related, getting in, they're arguing over child related issues rather than money, bring in an expert to help with that. And that's another thing that can stop, them deciding to settle because they're not, emotional over the custody and the decision making with their children as well.
Yep. So when we're saying referring to other professionals, you're looking at counselling, mediation. It's not just lawyer. It's not just lawyer and accountant.
Yeah. Is it? No, not at all. So it's very, very, really, really holistic and lots of different services and the professionals required to get, in some cases, to get a result.
Yeah, so incredibly interesting work, and as you said before, very complex, and getting to the bottom of these scenarios, and then how far out the other side do you then look at the planning side, I guess, at the end of that process?
Yeah, so when we know what's agreed, what's either what it's likely to be or what they have agreed to, then we are addressing the rebuilding and the ongoing, depending on the client's situation. We work with people sometimes that are the sole income earner, and they're left with not a lot because they're providing a lump sum for support for their children and wife or husband. So we'll often work in sort of rebuilding, and that again going into wealth creation type strategies moving forward, or in the case of when we're dealing with a person that receives a larger lump sum and doesn't have that income coming in, how do we make that work, and how do we help? And this actually starts earlier in the process when we're working through the negotiation side of things, but getting an idea and helping them really design the life they're going to have beyond this major change. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's you're right. That's that whole goals-based conversation, designing the life that they want to have beyond this.
Yeah.
And then trying to work out, you can't just make these assets appear from nothing. So it's about what the life you want and what are the assets you've got available.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that can be a fairly lengthy planning process, I guess, by the time you have to untangle everything and then set it up.
Yeah, it can be. And, I've got clients at the moment I'm working with who, or one client at the moment that's almost up to the 2-year mark. And it was a very quick negotiation process and agreement. They were great at agreeing.
Yep.
But the implementation has been so slow because there's been lots of property to be sold and negotiations between the husband and wife on what's a fair price and complications with financing. And so some of them are very long processes.
Yeah, I think it's really important that advisors and planners know what the complexities and problems can be during an untangling of a relationship, or whether it's an estate or whether it's a blending families or whatever it might be. So what are some of the things that advisors should be focusing on with their clients now? They might be a client where they're not getting divorced yet, or anything like that. But putting stuff in place, what do you recommend that advisors talk to their clients about for putting in place so that if something like this happens in the future, there's not a massive untangling cost process?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in a financial planning or an accounting practice, often one of the first people that gets called about a breakup or a big change, or obviously like loss, a premature death or disability, is the advisor or the accountant. And actually understanding the options available, I think is really important, because I know us as a practice, before I came on board, we had a number of family lawyers we knew of, and when people called up, we just sent them out. But we can add a lot more to the situation, and a lot of the family lawyers I know, even the sort of most respected in these financial type complex financial situations, think accountant and financial planner are the most important piece in this, and being able to deliver. You've got the trust already, and being able to help a client through that and deliver, information so they can make, decisions and so forth is really important.
Yep.
They hold the trusted advisor
Yep.
sort of position, and so I think even educating clients to call you first, and familiarising yourself with the options out there, because going straight to a lawyer isn't always the best option. We do refer straight to family lawyers for some clients. Others we refer to mediators and a lot of it is it's around cost, but it's also sometimes some of the bigger issues can be dealt with before lawyers are engaged.
Yep.
And you're more likely to have a better result and outcome.
Yeah, because it's an interesting piece of work. We might say, oh, well, you need to do your estate planning. And we all know that as advisors, yes, it's important to have estate planning in place, and if there's children involved, or if there's families, or or extended families, or kids have even kids, blended, meaning even kids have got different partners or whatever it might be. But having like that family law piece on it as well, if something happened to this relationship, then what would happen? Is an interesting thing for advisors to then bring to, say, a relationship or a client. And it's probably a hard thing to bring to a client unless they had a system or process around it.
Yeah. Well, it's something last year we started getting involved in more so. I mean, I've always done a little bit of that, but it was interesting. The FPA had, I don't know if you ever saw the FPA, sort of one of their promotions they were running called the ProNup, which was essentially just coaching around the different ways to manage money with couples. But it's really relevant, I think, for not only for the millennials, which when there's more of a instance of having separate funds and managing money quite differently, but in blended families when they enter, how they're going to manage that, and running right down to how they purchase assets together and their estate planning.
Yes.
And so forth.
Yep.
So that's something, we've done quite a bit with, but we work with a couple of family lawyers that are now really specialising in binding financial agreements for those sorts of families.
Yeah, I mean, I used to say something, and I don't know how accurate it is, probably very inaccurate, but the cost of untangling these things was often more than 10 times the price of setting it up in the first place.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Somebody who knows the numbers. Is that how am I going with that one?
Well, there's a lot of thought that you can't produce a BFA for under $10,000, and often more if it's complex. But there's a couple of lawyers I know around that are really, really smart financially. Our family lawyers that have got it sort of less than that, I guess, with quality sort of work. But and then some of the bills we see when people are in a sort of major financial conflict at the end of things, I mean, 50,000 per side is not unusual. That's quite normal. So if you sort of do that 10,000 as an average, and often more.
Okay. So, all right. So that's still a reasonably. I mean, because the idea of bringing that to a client from an advisor point of view is, where's the value in that piece of, paying for that work? And I think that 10 times the amount could be the value for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in those cases, financial planners can add so much value before you even start with the family lawyer, really understanding the options
Yep.
and straight from that, how do you manage your money day to day, and what the future can look like. Really, that education piece is very important.
Yep. Fantastic. So tell me about you in the future. What sort of things are you working on now for the near future and in 2020, and what do you want to personally do to sort of continue to grow in 2020?
Well, at the moment, I'm working way too many hours because I'm sort of wearing a few hats here. I work pretty heavily on the marketing and brand awareness of Quill, as well as working with the various divisions in delivering advice and running meetings and sort of we're starting to develop some new service packages, which based on sort of the work I have been doing personally, which now a lot of the team are now doing, but being able to actually communicate what that is and putting, recording the processes so we can scale that a little bit more.
Yep.
We're getting more referrals than we're able to manage at the moment, so we do need to have more staff members in that team, and I do the training and so doing a lot of that, and but educationally, the whole FASIA thing has put a bit of has diverted my attention to meeting those requirements this year.
Yep.
But I'm really interested in more the client skills, the psychology, that side of things. And while I've done a lot of training, I've done, a long time ago in Melbourne, I did life coaching with the Coaching Institute, and I've done quite a lot of the Bacharach-based but Australian versions.
Yep.
That type of training. I'd like to expand into more traditional mediation and understanding that because of the situations I find myself in.
Yep.
And I do short courses in that, but I'd really like to go and get qualified. That's a goal of mine. With all my spare time.
Yeah.
And I'd like to work a 35-hour week. That's a goal.
What's that?
Moved to the Gold Coast for lifestyle, and and it hasn't so far. It's been a lot of work, but it's it's fun.
Yes,
I enjoy it, and wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it.
Yes, fantastic. So, what tips would you give to consumers? Let's go with sort of around your target market, sort of goals-based advice for women.
Mm-hmm.
What tips would you give to those sort of clients that are thinking about trying to find the best advisor for them?
Okay. Certainly somebody who is targeting the market, or is interested in the market, and is familiar, I guess, with the issues that women in, someone that's familiar with the issues you may be experiencing. So I think there's a lot of value in the dealing with a professional woman who's also a mother, if that's your situation.
Yep.
Who should understand the same things you're dealing with. There's certainly, I've done quite a lot with medical professionals, and I've got no background in that. But since I've realised that there's quite a few both accountants and financial planners out there that work exclusively in that space or work in that niche, and you really do start to understand their the needs and the concerns are quite different to other professionals. So that's a bit of a tip.
Yep.
Someone that's familiar with the sort of, probably now pretty well publicised financial issues and gender biases that we or women are facing in the workforce. I think that understanding and navigating those, and I also think there's a lot of value with advisors that have got a more coaching side of things. There's a number of advisors around now, often female advisors, that have gone to more a coaching, a more coaching role, and often then pair with a financial planner. I think that there's value in that skill set.
And what tips would you give advisors and planners thinking about what they need to focus on in 2020?
2020. Well, I think we're all a little bit distracted by educational requirements, and certainly I think consumers are wanting. I think there's a real trend towards, again, the coaching, the understanding what clients really want. Adding value, being able to, there's tangible and intangible value, but being able to communicate that to clients and understand. So clients understand if you are charging X, what they can expect to get as a benefit out of it. I think that, as our fees have had to rise because of regulation and because of the changes that we've been going through. I think it's just really important to be able to communicate that value and understand that value. And I've made tables, to put where I sort of run through on Excel. What are we doing? Is it worth the fee that it's going to, the work that we have to do to deliver this advice? What's the client going to get out of it? What's it worth to them? And I like to be able to show them the tangible value, but then also communicate the intangible and the future value that may come.
Yeah, this is a really interesting point because, as you said, the fees have risen, and sometimes the fact that there's additional compliance or this and that and the other hasn't necessarily added any tangible value to the client, as in you've done this thing, it's now cost this, but it's put them in a better position of why. So having that tangible and intangible conversation would be really good.
Yeah, I think there's value in that. But I think it's also for planners, we sometimes think that clients are going to think it's a lot of money. Certain types of clients are not going to be turned off by these fees as long as they perceive they're getting value there. And the firm I worked for, I returned to Australia at the middle of the the start of the GFC actually, and the business I worked in and helped establish then, our target market, medical professionals. We ran a waiting list throughout the GFC for new advice, and our minimum fee was $10,000 for an SOA. And most of those clients actually were not high net worth. They may have been high income earning or future high income earning, but we did a really good job at communicating the value that we added and being a bit different to the next person, I guess.
Yep.
Offering something different. And as I said, we had a waiting list. We couldn't get enough advisors that had the right skills to deliver, the leads that we were generating.
Wow.
So
there you go.
Yeah. So people will pay.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So if you could go back in time and have a do-over, what tips would you give yourself and what would you change?
Early days, the early days, the focus on technical skills. While it is important to understand, but my complete focus was on technical skills, and I was lucky I was doing that A&P sales training in the background, which helped on the other side. I think following what I enjoyed doing. I think when I got to, it was 2004, after 10 years, and wanted to sell my business and get out, that was because I was doing work that didn't stimulate me and I didn't enjoy, instead of thinking about different ways to deliver. And there's just not one way to deliver advice. We're often educated that this is how you do it, and there's lots of other ways.
Yep.
There's lots of ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think in my early career too, it was I knew every PDS, I knew the answers to every single question. And some of the most successful advisors around would look at me and go, I don't know that. And you're like, well, you're really successful. And they're like, well, that's not because I knew every line in the PDS.
Yeah. You can always go and research, and that's our job, to go and understand what the needs are and understand what the goals and objectives are, and then research the best option afterwards. We don't need to know it while we're sitting there. But another thing is to work in an area or create a niche work in an area that you're comfortable with, and you know because you're experiencing it yourself.
Yep.
You know, a 22-year-old or 25-year-old aiming at retirement planning, like, you know, I didn't understand their issues.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Tell me if someone wants to continue the conversation, how can they find you?
Quill Group. My email is justine.hendry@quillgroup.com.au, and I'm on LinkedIn, Justine Hendry.
Fantastic.
I think there's only one of me with that name.
Very unique. There you go. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge.
Thanks for the chat, Fraser.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If you haven't already, I'd love you to subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. And to continue the conversation, head over to our social media channels. We'll catch you next time.